This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 43. So, in today's show, unfortunately, I still have not got anyone more interesting. So I speak to Dan the man. And we speak about something important for Dan. We speak about how to feel more alive. Something that he definitely needs. Because obviously speaking to him, you get the impression that he died about 3 months ago. So hopefully he will learn some stuff from this show. In the show, I, this time, make a grammatical mistake when speaking. But remember, that is the beauty of the show because it's real people speaking real English. And very often, people that are not so intelligent, which is most of the world, and I include myself in that, we often make mistakes. So if you listen to real English, you will also listen to mistakes. So try to understand what it is, and then at the end of the show, I'll tell you anyway. Remember, all the rock and roll vocabulary we speak about during the show is also on the website, rockandrollenglish.com. And one more thing, there is a story that involves me, 50 Cent, and a limousine. Just remember, I was only 18 when that happened. Okay, thanks a lot. Enjoy the show, and I will speak to you again at the end. Dan the man, how are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, well, it was 37 or 38 degrees here in Palermo today, so I'm actually quite hot, especially because now the windows are closed, so I'm talking to you. But except that, fantastic.
Oh, I'm very pleased.
You sound it. In fact, that is what today's podcast is about, because many of the listeners have commented that you sound very boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't really argue with that.
Of course not.
So today we're going to look at how to feel more alive, okay? So take a moment, go and get a pen and some paper and write it down, okay?
Are you talking to me or the listeners?
I'm talking to you.
Okay.
But before we do, what do we start with, Dan?
The review. I say review because we never get more than one.
Yeah, good, in the singular. Very good point as well, because this is the last one we have at the moment, so new ones are very welcome. So this review is from, it's written Likabi, who I believe is a listener in Japan, and it says, it's fun to listen to conversations between two funny guys. I thought there was only one funny guy on this podcast.
You're funny, don't worry, you are funny.
I don't know who the second one is. Anyway, it says, not only fun, but also very useful to learn English. Furthermore, vocabulary and quizzes are written on the website. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Likabi, for your review. And I apologise, as always, if I have not pronounced that correctly. So, let's get on to this show, because it's very important for you, Dan, about how to feel more alive, okay? So we have 10 things. Well, I think there are 10. It just sounds better if you say 10. So we've got 10 things, and we're just going to talk about them and see if they do make you feel more alive, okay? So the first one says to blast out some great music. So what does it mean to blast out, Dan?
To play very loudly.
Oh, yeah. So to play some great music loudly, like this. Boom shakalaka. That was the Trogs singing Wild Thing. So do you feel more alive now, Dan?
What, because you've played that song?
Well, we're trying to follow the advice here, Dan, okay? So blast out some great music. I've blasted out some great music.
Okay, I can't contain myself. I feel very much alive.
Yeah, as always, you definitely sound it. Okay, so the second one is to put your head out of a sunroof whilst the car is moving. So just to explain, what is the sunroof, Dan?
It's the window on the roof of the car.
Well, that's one way of explaining it. Yeah, so if you're in a car, stand out of the sunroof and just take in the fresh air. Have you ever done that, Dan?
Once, yeah.
How did it go?
Well, I never did it again, so...
That's probably why you don't feel alive.
Yeah. Well, how often do you do it?
All the time, baby. All the time. The only time I remember doing this, seriously, I was in a white limousine. And obviously, limousine is the big white cars.
What a chav.
CHAV is an absolutely fantastic piece of rock and roll vocabulary there, Dan. So the word chav is actually a very, very British word that has only been around for about 10 years, maybe a little bit more, and basically means someone like a lower class member of society that behaves like a hooligan, much like me and Dan, to be honest.
Especially you.
Yeah, but really, when I was out of the sunroof, the limousine, I really did think I was like 50 Cent or something, like Dr. Dre, maybe.
Where were you?
Just going to Malden, which is a very small town.
Are you serious? Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. Luckily, most of the listeners don't know how boring and depressing Malden is, but that was me, going to a boring, depressing place with my head out of a limousine. Anyway, so another one here we have is to destroy something. It says to destroy like an object in your house. Have you ever done that?
I've broken many things, yeah. But to actually go out your way to break something to make yourself feel better?
Yes, exactly. So when he says there to go out of your way, it basically means to make extra effort to do it on purpose. If you're asking me, Dan, which you're not, but
yeah, I'm not.
But still. So if you're asking me, I would love to break like a printer, like to take like a baseball bat and just destroy a printer.
Why?
I just think it would be satisfying. It would make me feel alive, Dan, which is the point of this podcast and article.
I think you'd seriously hurt yourself if you took a baseball bat to a printer.
What, you think the printer would win the fight?
I think something would break off and hurt you, yeah.
So there's me, a human, with a baseball bat and a printer that doesn't move, and you're saying the printer would win the fight.
I'm saying you would end up in A&E, yeah.
So a nice bit of a rock and roll vocabulary there again. You'd end up. So if you end up doing something, it means, well, you didn't intend to do that, but in the end, that happened. And A&E is what we say in, well, England, of going to accident and emergencies, the part of a hospital, which is obviously a great place to go. So another one here is to do something spontaneous. You are probably the least spontaneous person I have ever met, Dan.
Compared to yourself?
Well, I actually do have one crazy spontaneous thing I did once, which was get a tattoo.
Yeah, go on, explain that one.
So when I was 16, one of my friends and I, Koma, who has been on this podcast actually, on the holiday episode, we said, let's do something crazy. What should we do? Let's get a tattoo. I mean, that's how crazy I was back then. And so, yeah, we got a tattoo, and that was it.
So go on then, where is it, and what does it say? Obviously I know, but people need to know this.
So it's on my bum, which actually I actually thank God every day it was there, because if I had have got it like on my arm, my life, well, now would be terrible. That is actually mixed conditional there, Dan. Do you know what conditionals I just mixed?
Obviously not.
Well, I mixed the third conditional because I said if I had got it on my arm about the past, now my life would be ruined. Terrible. So I got it on my bum and it says Martin in Chinese, but unfortunately for me, Martin in Chinese looks a lot like it says BJ. And BJ means in English something very different. If you don't know, I recommend looking on Google, okay? Because I don't want to talk about this.
It means blowjob. But are you sick of explaining that to women on the few occasions you actually...
Well, that's it, Dan. I never actually get any women, so no one ever sees it, so it's not a problem. Anyway, moving on from talking about my bum and blowjobs, Another one here we have is exercise, because apparently exercise is the best legal drug on the market. So, do you feel alive after exercise, Dan?
Yeah.
Right. What we need to do, you need to tell me the exact moment you finish exercising,
And give you a call.
And then we will record the podcast, because that is obviously the only time that you ever feel alive.
Well, you don't make me feel alive. That's the problem. Okay, quite the opposite, in fact.
Well, if you feel alive after exercise, Dan, that is the time to record.
Do you feel alive after exercise?
I always feel alive, Dan.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Have another one here of dance. What are you like on the dance floor, Dan? So what the dance floor is obviously the place in a club where you dance. It's a very common question to say, what are you like on the dance floor? Are you a good dancer?
I'm too tall and awkward to be able to dance.
Generally, British men don't really like dancing that much. I can speak for myself that I am the typical British man of I will only go onto the dance floor when I am extremely drunk. And, well, I would hate to see a video of what I look like when I am dancing, because...
I'm sure there's some knocking about, though.
So when he says there, some videos knocking about, he's basically saying some videos do exist. They are just difficult to find. So yeah, I'm sure there are some videos knocking around, but luckily they are difficult to find, Dan, and I hope and pray every day nobody ever finds one. Although I do have a story about dancing. One time I did feel alive with my friend Coma, again, actually. Not the same day we got the tattoo, but a different day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we went back to his house and put on some music. We put on this song. Woo-hoo, Lucy Pearl, Don't Mess With My Man there. So yeah, we put on this music and were dancing crazily in his room at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then his dad come home and said, "What are you doing?" And at the point he opened the door, we were both going completely crazy. But we were doing some good dance moves, Dan. So, okay, Dan, so we've got another one here. Do something illegal. Have you ever done anything illegal in your whole life?
Well, I once drove through an amber/red.
So he's talking about the traffic light there, because obviously it goes red, amber, green. So it was nearly red and you drove through it.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Dan. When will the police come and lock you up?
What about you?
Well, obviously, there was a time I didn't pay for my meal in the restaurant. But again, that is a story that has been told on this podcast. So go back and listen to the going to prison for some pasta to hear that story. But I can tell you now, it didn't end very well for me. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Did you feel more alive?
When we were basically running away, I did actually feel very alive. In fact, I thought I was going to have a heart attack, but I lived.
Just because you didn't pay for some gnocchi. God.
Exactly. Okay, and we have another one here, Dan, of make love. So, do you...
Oh, God, you're always talking about this.
Do you feel alive after making love? Or have you ever made love, Dan?
I don't know. Still to be confirmed.
Yeah, well, I think we're both negative on that, so I think we can move to the next one. Okay, so this one's a serious one, Dan, okay? So obviously we were joking about the other ones, but this is serious. So it says, tell someone how you really feel about them instead of waiting because you're scared. So let's have it. Cards on the table, which means let's be honest with each other. Completely honest. How do you feel about me? Dan, I said this is a serious one, all right?
I just wasn't expecting that. Yeah, you're all right.
Oh, well, thanks for that compliment, Dan.
How do you feel about me?
You're okay. Well, Dan, if you had told me, I would have told you. Third conditional there, but we're going
I did tell you.
Keep living in denial, if that's what you want. No problem. Oh, and this one, actually, next one, Dan, is something you actually did recently. It says, tell your boss that you don't want to work there anymore and start pursuing your passion. So what does it mean to pursue your passion?
To do the things you like.
Yes, and to
Or
follow
the
your
thing
passion.
you like. Yeah.
Yes, like to pursue is like another way to say follow, to pursue your passion, pursue a career. So how do you feel, Dan, now you're pursuing your passion? And your passion is what? Just sitting around in France getting sunburnt. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. You should join me.
Yeah, so how do you feel more alive after now you're pursuing your passion?
Well, yeah, I feel far more alive not being sat in a grey office for 8 to 9 hours a day.
Well, okay, so one thing is definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
Although, probably to the listeners, we should say don't quit your jobs because, otherwise you'll end up like Dan the Man. Had that one earlier, remember, it's not what you want to happen, but it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the last one is to plan a holiday to a destination you've always dreamed about visiting. Mm-hmm. So where would you like to go most, Dan?
Probably Patagonia in Argentina.
Good choice. Why?
Looks nice.
Jesus Christ, Dan. Honestly, even talking to you, I feel like I want to kill myself. This is supposed to be about how to feel more alive.
I want you to kill yourself. This is why I'm like this, okay?
Okay, well, thanks. So this is how you really feel about me. Okay,
yes.
Now we know. Thank you. Okay, well, my destination of choice, thanks again for asking, Dan. Not far from Argentina, though. I would say Brazil. I would especially like to go to Rio.
Mm-hmm. We actually have listeners in Brazil.
We have listeners in all over the world, Dan, okay?
Mm-hmm. I actually live with a couple of Brazilians. I should tell them and they can tell you where to go.
Okay, well, thanks. Anyway, Dan, I cannot handle talking to you anymore. Remember, I cannot manage means handle. So I need to go, okay? Because I want to feel alive. I don't want to kill myself, even though I know that is your intention.
No, don't kill yourself, okay? I don't want to be taken to court or put in prison for encouraging you to kill yourself, okay?
Okay, thanks. So that is the small print, the legal small print. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
See you later.
See you later, mate.
Okay, so that was Dan the Man and me speaking about how to feel more alive. But having finished the show now, I have come to realise that even if Dan the Man met a naked woman on the street, he would probably just say, "Hi, I'm Dan." There is just no life in that man. Anyway, let's look at that rock and roll vocabulary. So at the beginning, we had blast out some music. When you play the music loudly, so that blast out, just remember the phrase really, blast out some music. And related to the cars, we had the sunroof, which remember is like the window at the top of the car that allows the sun to enter. It's quite an obvious word really, but not many people know that. Another nice piece of vocabulary Dan the Man said was when I spoke to him about breaking something in his house. And he said that he wouldn't go out of his way to break something. So if you go out of your way to do something, it means you make the extra effort and you do it on purpose. And we also had end up in A&E. So there are two things there. One is the phrasal verb to end up, which remember is when you don't intend to do something, but you end up doing it anyway. For example, I didn't really intend to live in Sicily, but I ended up living in Sicily. Notice how, as well, we have ing after that verb. Some rock and roll grammar there as well. And A&E, remember, is the place you go in hospital if you have an emergency. Accidents and emergencies. If you break your leg, where do you go? A&E. And we also had the word CHAV, which is extremely common in Britain now to use this word. And although it doesn't sound great to say it, we use it to describe, let's say, lower members of society that basically drink a lot, act like hooligans. I'll actually have a picture of a chav on the website so you can have a better idea of what I'm talking about. And remember, Dan called me a chav because I am a lower member of society and sometimes drink. And we had dance floor. That's quite obvious, but just remember the word because not many people know that. The place you go to dance. A very slang term Dan used was when he said, I'm sure there are some videos knocking about or knocking around. It's the same. Remember, it's when something is difficult to find, but it exists. Maybe if you want to go out and you have no shoes, you ask your mum, have I got any shoes to wear? And she says, look in the cupboard. I'm sure there are some knocking about. They're just difficult to find, but you can find them. Another thing that's quite obvious, but again, not many people know, is when Dan was talking about a crime he committed and he said he went through amber light, because in England, the traffic lights are red, amber and green, not red, orange and green, okay? And a nice sort of idiom that I used was when I said, let's put our cards on the table to Dan. When I said, let's speak honestly. How do we feel about each other? Let's put our cards on the table. But unfortunately, he didn't. We had the word pursue, which is when you follow something, especially used for passion and career. If you pursue a career in, I don't know, teaching English, maybe you will end up doing podcasts, a bit like me. And at the end, we had the word handle again, which we've had in the last few weeks, actually. Just shows how common that word is when I said to Dan, I can't handle talking to you anymore. I can't manage it. It's too much for me. So, the mistake. When I was talking to Dan about the fact I was happy I got the tattoo on my bum, I said this, because if I had have got it like on my arm. So notice there how I said, if I had have got it on my arm. So that should really be, if I had got it on my arm. But it's a common thing to say, actually, between native speakers, this had have. I'm not sure why. I've just done some research now, actually. So third conditional is obviously difficult for us. For example, instead of if I had written, many people would say if I had have written. I don't know why. Us English people are just stupid. We are all chavs. But as I said at the beginning of the show, this is real English and real people. So often mistakes happen. And again, as I've mentioned in other shows, if you make mistakes, do not worry, because even us native speakers do it. So remember, all the rock and roll vocabulary is on the website, rockandrollenglish.com, and there also is a crazy quiz. And one last thing, we are out of reviews now. We had 2 in a row, which is a lot for this show. So if you are kind enough to do it and leave us a review, preferably on iTunes, please send me a picture so I can see it. Okay? Thanks very much. Have a good weekend. Remember how to feel alive, and I will see you on Monday. Keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.